Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar. I'm Jenny Bailey from the Agile Business Consortium. We're the not-for-profit member organisation who are leading, promoting and enabling business agility worldwide. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started, really. We're recording this webinar, so everybody who's registered for it will get in a follow-up email. And also, we're happy to take questions. So if you have questions, you can see there in the middle of the screen, there's the webinar go-to platform. So please fill in your questions there, and I'd be delighted to put them to my guest either during the webinar or there will be time at the end as well. And always, that last bit there on that slide is it's always great to receive your feedback. We're always trying to improve the webinars and improve the topics, really, that we're actually sharing with you, with all the Agile thought leaders that I have the privilege of speaking to. So if there's a topic that you're really interested in that maybe we haven't covered just yet, then please let me know, and I'll see if I can put it in the schedule and the agenda for next year. Now, let's crack on with today's webinar. So, it's been over 2 months now since my guest today took up the seat at the Consortium, the top seat, shall we say, and I'm delighted that he's agreed to join us today to share his experiences and thoughts for the future. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our new CEO here at the Consortium, Mr. John Williams. Welcome, John.
Jenny, thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon to you and to everybody else. And I think a message to our chairman, when Jenny said I was in the top seat, she didn't mean your seat. Okay.
Absolutely not, Jeff. No, it's all safe. It's all good. Actually, it's good morning to people as well, because we've got people joining us from all over the world, actually globally. So it's fantastic. So we have to recognise and acknowledge that it's morning for them, afternoon for others, and evening as well.
Absolutely right. And I well remember from the time that I've spent working and living overseas that very often people forget what time of day it is. I remember when I lived in Hong Kong for a while, I had a friend, a business associate who used to call me from New York, which is 12 hours difference.
Yeah, sure.
And he would say, it's 4:30 in the afternoon here, John. What time is it there in Hong Kong? Well, it's 12 hours difference, Roy. It's 4:30 in the morning.
I'm surprised you answered the phone, John.
You never know what's going to be on the end of it.
Fair enough. No, good point. Now, you're a senior business leader and an experienced director with a background in public, private and third sectors, working with and for organisations around the world, like you just suggested. So how did you find us, out of interest?
Well, it is actually quite interesting, because in a way, the consortium sort of found me. I was contacted by the headhunter who was doing the recruitment for the post, and asked if I'd be interested in a not-for-profit organisation chief exec role. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, maybe. Tell me a little bit about it. So they did, and I said, oh, it sounds quite interesting. And they said, okay, I'll tell you, it's to do with Agile. And I said, well, I don't really know anything much about Agile. And we talked about it a little bit more, and I started to realise, actually, when you think about Agile with a capital A, I actually don't have a background in Agile methodologies and Agile principles. I have, though, I suppose the way I would describe it is I've lived an Agile life. Okay. I've lived a life that's been I've been very privileged to work in many countries and in different organisations, but actually to experience engagement with people who've been running Agile projects, whether it's in banking or indeed actually sometimes in projects like oil and gas or in construction. So I was not quite as ignorant about Agile as I thought I was.
Oh, fantastic. So you jumped at the chance?
I did, actually. The more that I learned, well, the reason for that is the more that I learned about the consortium, the more that I learned about business agility and the timing of the role, the more attractive it became for a number of reasons, really. I think it's, first of all, because the consortium is an organisation that's poised on the brink of becoming a global organisation in the proper sense of the word, in sense of being active all over the world. And that's evinced by some of the people that we've got on the call today from various parts of the world. Mm-hmm. Also because of the timing in the context of, I'll call it the shift from Agile with a capital A to business agility. Okay. From the thinking around Agile as a group of principles and a methodology to a mindset. And we'll talk a bit more about that, I'm sure, in a few minutes. But it was that combination of interest in agility as a principle and interest in the timing for the business agility community that made me think, actually, yeah, this would be just right.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we're delighted you found us. In all honesty.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So far.
So has it really only been just 2.5 months, John?
It is incredibly. It's only been about 2.5 months, and in some ways, I think, and many people listening to this will know exactly what I mean. It feels like no time at all, and yet it feels like years, because the learning curve has been quite steep in a lot of ways. Not so much around how business agility works, because, as I mentioned earlier, I have a mindset that works in that way and a background that works in that way. It's more about getting to grips with the remarkable range of interpretations of agile thinking and agile principles, in not just in various sectors or geographies, but in various people's minds.
Sure.
Almost everybody seems to think of agile or business agility as meaning something slightly different from everybody else.
Sure. No, fair enough.
And I think one of the challenges in the first couple of months has been getting to grips with that and trying to. It's like a great big jigsaw puzzle, and all the pieces of the puzzle are there. Some of them are turned face down, and some of them are turned face up, and the edge hasn't been finished yet. We're just trying to start to put together that puzzle, and it is. I have to say, I'm not sure whether it's simpler than I expected, or if I'm brighter than I thought. I suspect it's the first one. It seems to be coming together a bit more quickly than I had originally envisaged.
Wow. Okay. Now, I know your very first day with us was at the conference, wasn't it? On the second day of the conference, the 27th of September. So that must have been a walk into it and everything's happening, because obviously it was an extremely busy conference, having 300 odd people there, delegates and amazing keynote speakers and presentations. And I mean, we were covering strategy, people and delivery with the whole theme of Generation Agile. So it was a very busy environment. And my goodness, your first day, how did you find it?
It was one of those instances where one just has to be plug and play, because it was actually, it was a really, really good introduction. And I think because the things that stood out for me there were the incredible range of people in terms of the roles that they played within organizations, the incredible range of people who were there at the conference, and the amazing energy that was clearly evident in all of the conversations that I had and that I saw people having. And I remember actually listening to one of the doormen on the venue as I was coming in. I think one of his friends, one of his colleagues said something to him, and he said in quite a loud voice, he said, "Yeah, you can always tell the people who come in for the Agile thing, they're so cheerful." And I thought, that's quite an interesting thing to hear from somebody who has to put up with the general public every day.
Yeah.
But it was that energy. I could feel it all the way through the conference, and people having conversations. And what that told me, and this fits with this idea of the amazing range of interpretations of Agile, and people want to have conversations about this. They are keen to find out how this can actually contribute to not only their self-development, but how their organizations develop and how they improve their performance and how they improve their fulfillment actually in their roles and in their lives. So the conference was great for me. It was an immediately high energy introduction to the world of business agility.
Oh, fantastic. And also, like you were saying, the conversations have been continuing since the conference as well, because you've been all over the place, haven't you? You've been very busy and your feet haven't really touched the ground, I don't think.
That's absolutely right. And both here in the UK, and I've had loads of conversations with people that were specifically derived from the conference and the people I met there. Also, some of the conversations I've had with people overseas. I was in Poland chairing a number of panels at an SME banking conference, which was quite interesting, because whilst the conference wasn't about agility, a couple of the panels that I chaired were specifically about business agility and its application in the finance and the financial services sector, and an extremely good example of that in ING Bank from the Netherlands, who've been deliberately applying agile principles to the way they developed the bank. I was fortunate enough to be able to go to Sweden, to Gothenburg, to meet a group called Beyond Budgeting, which may not be familiar to absolutely everybody. However, it is a term to watch, because we will be doing a great deal more in conjunction with the Beyond Budgeting team. If we think, I suppose the easiest way for me to describe Beyond Budgeting is to say it's an agile approach to finance.
Yes.
And I think it's worth, therefore, digging into by our business agility community, because it has a definite read across between finance and what we do in the rest of an organisation. And then I was in Amsterdam to have a conversation with IPMA, the International Project Managers Association, because for pretty obvious reasons in the context of agile and project management, the shift now. And I see this, I think, in the project management associations that I talk to, from what I would call methodological agile thinking to this broader business agility approach, and thinking not just about how do we make a project agile, actually, how do we fit the agile project into the rest of the organization of which that project is a part. And that's broader business agility thinking. So a whole load of stuff that's come out of the conference, which has shaped the conversations that I've been having with individuals and with organizations around the future of the consortium and the future of business agility.
Okay, you've certainly been kept busy, that's for sure. And conversations are always good. And we relish those opportunities, really, don't we?
Oh, constantly. And in a way, I think about the role of the consortium in particularly in the context of conversations, actually. The consortium is the hub of a network. And I always think there are three functions to a network hub. One of them is to provide content to the members of the network, webinars like this, for example, collateral, white papers, things like that. One of them is to provide connections between the members of the network. So the people who are listening to this webinar, for example, may want to be connected with one another, not just with us. And the third one is to provide collaboration between our network and other networks. And if we think about it, whether it's content or connections or collaboration, every one of those is a form of conversation.
Absolutely.
And I think there's what is it they say? Innovation is a function of ideas. Ideas are a function of connections. We despite the Eureka, I nearly said myth, the Eureka story, I don't think anybody really has their best ideas sitting in a darkened room or even in the bath, quite honestly, by themselves. We have our best ideas when we're in conversation with people.
Absolutely. It's all about communication, and it's vital. It really is.
Yeah.
Let's go back to what you were saying about communication and the confusion that you've experienced out there. I think that's quite interesting to kind of delve a little bit deeper into.
Yeah, it was a bit of I suppose it was a bit of a surprise for me because the research that I did around Agile and methodologies and principles and stuff like that before I started the recruitment process for this job gave me the clear picture that there was absolute clarity around Agile.
Right.
We know what the principles are, we know what a number of methodologies, but we know what they are, and we know that we apply them and a result occurs. Yes,
just like that.
Absolutely right. Yes, a clear indication of my naivety, I think, probably there. What has come out of this is there's clearly an enormous amount of confusion in the marketplace around two things. One of which is of the varying methodologies which are out there for applying Agile principles, which one or ones might be applicable in any particular instance. And secondly, actually, what do we mean by Agile? And that confusion is borne out, I think, in this eagerness of people to talk, this energy, this desire for conversation, because everybody out there is seeking a solution to a challenge, and they are seeking it avidly from the business agility portfolio, if you like. Sure,
absolutely. So I guess then it begs the question, when we look at definitions, to kind of put you on the spot a little bit. 2.5 months in, John, what would be your definition of Agile and business agility, out of interest?
Yeah, it's interesting because there are myriad definitions of both out there, and that adds, I think, to the confusion. I suppose for me that one of the challenges is Agile is usually both spoken and written with a capital A, which gives it a very specific focus, and people expect it to be a very specific definition, therefore. I would prefer to take the capital A off the front and just look at it as the word Agile, the way we would talk about anything else. As being agile, nimble and flexible and adaptable and able to move quickly out of the way in the event of an impending threat and stuff like that. Agility and business agility specifically, agility generally, is for me probably a better way to think about how we describe this. And I would use two words to define agility. and they would be health and fitness. Now, the health purists out there, if I say that health is an absence of disease, for example, the health purists out there would say, oh, there's more to it than that. But if we stick with that simple definition, health as an absence of disease or challenge, I guess, and fitness as the ability to thrive with the demands of one's environment. So agility is about being internally healthy as an organization and being externally able to cope with the demands of one's environment. And for me, that is the essence of agility, to be healthy and fit as an organization.
Okay, and we need a lot of that at the moment, obviously, with the uncertainty that's out there in the climate and the world, really.
Yes, unfortunately, no one's going to mention things like Brexit. Oops, there I did. I think for those of us who are not in the UK, I apologise for this. For those of us in the UK, there's probably nothing else that we hear about on a daily basis. It's actually quite a good example of, I know that some of you will have come across this unlovely acronym VUCA, V-U-C-A. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that was coined in about 1998 to describe, 1989, to describe the post-Cold War world. It is a pretty apposite description of the world of business and, in fact, the world that organizations generally work in now. So that volatility, because things are going up and down, and uncertainty in particular. We make, as human beings, we make decisions both individually and organizationally on the basis of as much certainty as we can muster. And when we live in a world which is constantly uncertain, then actually the only response to that is to be agile. So is to focus on how capable are we of being adaptable and flexible and nimble, no matter what may occur in the environment in which we work. And I think notwithstanding Brexit, or indeed any of the other big things which are happening around the world in various countries, we have to get used to the fact that we now live with uncertainty to a degree that I'm not sure has actually been like this for quite a long time. You know, the very point of VUCA as an acronym was that in the world when the Cold War was on, it was a relatively simplistic world. There was an us and a them. There was a good and an evil. There was, we knew who the baddies were and who the goodies were. And actually, that's no longer the case in anything that we do. So, in a world of uncertainty, agile thinking, an agile mindset, is the antidote to uncertainty.
Yes. Yeah. No, a very good way of putting it. Absolutely. Okay, so let's look at the consortium now. Let's shift our focus a little bit.
Yep.
Obviously, you've taken the reins, and our mission is leading, promoting, and enabling business agility worldwide. That's a vast mission, isn't it?
Yes, that's a second only to making the world a better place.
Yeah.
I think,
and world peace.
And world peace, that's right. Yes, indeed. World peace would be easy if I could do this. I think if we looked at the three words there, leading, promoting, and enabling, leadership in business agility, it doesn't mean that we want to be the most well-known organization in business agility. It doesn't mean that we want to be in charge of business agility around the world. It means that we want to be amongst those organizations that are leading the thinking and the development of thinking in the business agility context. And there will be a number of organizations who are party to that, everybody from academics to large corporates to organizations, not-for-profits like ourselves. Actually, we want to be one of those, promoting the concept and the principles and the development, I think, of business agility. We think, as I said before, the idea of being healthy and fit in an uncertain world. Promoting business agility is tantamount to promoting people's ability to cope with the future, both individually and as organizations. And then enabling business agility, most definitely. We have some, and they're mentioned on the slide, we have some products in the context of knowledge and wisdom and emerging in handbooks and certifications and stuff like this, which will enable people to become more agile in the way that they do things, but actually enabling business agility simply by raising awareness of the need for business agility and then connecting people with opportunities to become more agile. So that, in a sense, that's our mission deconstructed, I think, really there.
Absolutely. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say the next bit about the products, Agile PM, BA, PGM, and Agile Digital Services that we've been responsible for producing, I think, and of course our conference. These are, I suppose, there's some of the tangible things that we do. That the consortium, if I think about the shape of the consortium, it does three things, as any professional body would do. It's the core of a community, both our membership and those other stakeholders who have an interest in business agility. It is the source of thought leadership in the research that we do, in the handbooks that we provide, which result in products and training courses. And it is also well, how would I describe this? The community thought leader and solutions provider. So the products themselves and also services and ideas. So within that, we as an organisation need to produce a constant stream of products is a bit of a hard-edged word to describe it, but tangible ideas that people can explore and exploit in the context of becoming more agile. And the conference, of course, is a nice anchor for us each year to be able to continue that promoting and enabling.
Absolutely. It just joins forces with the whole Agile community, really, doesn't it? And I think it's worth mentioning there about our partners also, John, and also the working groups that we what the research that we're putting into this sort of work.
Yeah, and I think it's really, really important this, because we are one organisation as part of, I mentioned other organisations around the world, leading and promoting business agility. We are just one organisation with an aim to deliver on a huge agenda. But we are not the only people promoting business agility, and it will take all of us together. The only way we can actually make a difference in the world is for us to leverage the partnerships that we can generate with organisations who are either similar to ourselves or indeed directly in the corporate world or indeed in the public sector. And those partnerships, some of whom, of course, are very specific to us in supporting the conference, some of whom are specific to us in co-branding or co-developing products and services with us, whoever they are, and there are many of them, and they know who they are. We cannot deliver this. We cannot deliver a positive outcome, I think, without leveraging our partnerships and our access to those partnerships. And I think the same is true of every other organisation like ours that wants to try and achieve a change in the world.
Absolutely. Okay, let's look at how this is going to be achieved. And obviously, leadership. We've mentioned the benefit of the mindset, the agile mindset. I mean, that's a huge thing for everyone really to get their heads around. But once they're there, they can become very secure in that, I think. Let's look at leadership and values and culture in terms of your elements and with respect to you, in terms of your leadership and your values.
Yeah, sure. And I have a very specific approach to leadership, which is to be consultative. I mentioned earlier on this idea that nobody has the best ideas sitting in a room by themselves. One of the very bases of agility is that good ideas can come from absolutely anywhere. So the idea of a 21st century leadership model, which is an inclusive and diverse and consultative one, is the only way actually to approach something like this. And not just obviously within our own organisation, but we as exemplars for other organisations and stuff like that. That says a great deal, I think, about the need for certain values and a certain culture within the organisation, and the values that we espouse within the consortium. There are some fundamental ones, such as the respect for each other, for example, the desire to do good as opposed to simply generating money or whatever it is. But also, of course, values that recognise this idea that good ideas can come from anywhere. And one of the most important values is not just a willingness, but a desire to be inclusive. Obviously, we all want to be diverse. It's interesting. I heard a definition of the difference between diversity and inclusion once, and they said diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. And I thought that was really quite clever.
Nice.
So actually, when it comes to being diverse and being inclusive in the context of agility and in the context of getting ideas from everywhere, it's not enough to just have everybody at the party. We need to seek out everybody who wants to dance. We need to get ideas from absolutely everybody. And that's one of the ways in which I will approach what we do within the consortium, both within my team within the consortium and within that broader community around it, the members, the other stakeholders, the members of our board. We want to seek out their ideas about how we can lead, enable and promote business agility worldwide. And what that says about our culture, it's quite funny because another definition here. The definition of culture is usually the way we do things around here.
Sure.
And I remember once in sitting in a meeting and saying to somebody, no, the best definition of culture is the, how did I describe it? The sum total of all the barriers to progress. And of course, that's a useful description of a negative culture.
Very much so. Yeah.
But interestingly enough, if we turn that on its head, actually, it's the sum total of all the things that remove barriers to progress. And it's that willingness to be inclusive, that willingness to seek out ideas from everybody else. So and I think in terms of my approach to leadership, values and culture, actually, open source is the term that I would use.
Okay, that's good. Out of interest, though, has that always been the way, or was that learned behaviour for you?
Oh, that's definitely learned behaviour.
Yeah, right.
I think I spent quite a few years of my life, particularly in the early years when I was in management as opposed to leadership, falling into most of the traps that managers fall into around assuming that, first of all, that seniority meant wisdom. Secondly, that status was determined by my position on the organisation chart.
Right.
And thirdly, by, I think this might be a personal ego thing, the assumption I was always right. So, of course, one learns to unlearn some of those things by bitter experience. And actually, what is very nice, and this is probably something which is agile with a small a, I guess, really. One learns through bitter experience. One unlearns the silly things through bitter experience, and then discovers actually as the pendulum swings the other way, learning to be open source, to be inclusive, to seek out other people's ideas and to benefit from them is actually a really positive experience. And life becomes better when we become agile in our mindset.
Absolutely. It's interesting. We've done a few webinars on leadership and understanding leadership and what makes us tick. One particular one that I remember was with Alan Furlong of Sherpa People Systems. And he said if anybody is going to be a leader, they first have to do like a self-mastery course. They have to know themselves. So did you go through that process out of interest?
Yeah, I did. And in actual fact, I've written leadership development programs for a number of organizations. And the first thing on every single one of those is about self-awareness. And I have some of our listeners will be aware of various forms of psychometric assessments, Myers-Briggs, 16PF, things like this. Right. I've done dozens of these, partly because I really like doing them, but also because actually they are a tremendous form of self-learning.
Sure.
It's not just about, okay, this is me, and therefore when I work in a team, this is how I'm best deployed in the team and how people should respond to me and stuff like this. Actually, reading into it about ourselves, sometimes quite uncomfortable, and therefore, of course, extremely valuable. I love the lifelong learning anyway. Lifelong self-learning is also equally valuable. And just to mention that thing about comfort, culture. We talked about leadership values and culture before, and I think this is a principle around culture that not just applied in our own organisation, we as individuals can apply in our organisations wherever we are. There's a lovely meme that I've seen going around LinkedIn, which talks of there's two circles. One big circle which says where the magic happens, and then a little way away there's a small circle that says your comfort zone. And what I like about that is in order to get where the magic happens, we need to move out of our comfort zone. And it's one of the things that definitely I've had to learn over the course of my career.
Oh, that's interesting. That whole command and control thing is so opposed to Agile in so many ways, isn't it? Agile is so far removed from that now.
Yeah.
But for some people, it's very hard to let go of, isn't it?
It is. And I have to say, with the best will in the world, even when we know we are right promoting business agility, we know we're right because we know it works. It's the antidote to uncertainty and all those other good things. Habit is not something that is easily undone. And the habit of command and control, particularly at senior and very senior levels in organizations, has been with us for centuries, probably since organizations were invented. I think it was Mark Twain that said, a habit cannot be easily thrown out of the window. It needs to be coaxed down the stairs one step at a time. And I think that lovely analogy about having to have several conversations, for example, with the C-suite of an organization before we unfreeze their minds from their existing rigidity and free them up, let them, in a sense, free themselves to think in an agile way. One of the things that I've discovered talking to businesses, and I'm discovering now with hindsight that these were agile conversations that I had with people during the course of my career, is that once a business mind is unfrozen, and I don't just mean in the private sector, I mean anybody who's running an organization, once their mind is unfrozen from its rigidity, they will automatically seek other places to go and improvements in their performance, and they will look for ways that they can be helped to achieve that. And it's quite interesting because lots of people, many people, are working their hardest, doing their very, very best to deliver for the organization and for themselves. And very often systems will get in their way. People are too rigid often in their thinking to be able to step back from the system and say, well, actually, we could do this differently. Why don't we do this differently?
Sure.
Once one persuades them to give themselves permission to think in an agile way, it can transform the individual and the organization at a pace which is much more rapid than they think, and to much greater degree and much better outcome.
But as we're aware, it's a kind of like a leap of faith in some respects, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And again, back to this idea of the command and control has been the MO of organizations for donkey's years. And to say, okay, from now on, all those levers of power that you've got, they're not going to be attached to anything. Okay, you're just going to agree with all the people in your organization. This is what we'll achieve. Okay, we all say yes, and then you let them get on with it. You don't say to them, how are you doing?
Yeah.
You don't say to them, have you done this yet? Or anything like that. You actually give them freedom to deliver in the best way they know. And especially for those organizations which, I was going to say that the B2C, those organizations which deal with very, very large numbers of customers in the retail, for example, the idea of sitting at the top of an organization that talks to consumers as the end user and not having any power over the product or service delivery to those people is anathema to anybody who has been in management with a capital M and has been developed in that. And it's one of the reasons, I think, why, coming back to this idea of research that we are doing as a consortium, we are more and more interested in promoting the idea of leadership attached to the business agility agenda, not solely management. Because leadership is to many people, a more freewheeling word, but actually it's a softer, lighter touch. And there are many definitions of leadership, but if it involves motivation, support and reward, rather than giving instructions and orders, actually thinking like a leader rather than thinking like a manager is one of the first steps towards the C-suite, or indeed the command and control fraternity, becoming agile in their thinking.
It's interesting, isn't it? I wanted to bring your attention really because you're talking about some of the research we're obviously doing, and I know this is still in development, this model, but this is the framework that we've put together for business agility, isn't it?
Yes.
And this really does encompass and it depicts all the points that I think people need to use as guidance, where they need to pay attention to achieve business agility.
Yeah, and the key thing about this is that the picture, and I'm a very visual person, so it's very useful for me to have pictures. I can interpret things quite well. The picture identifies both the generic and the specific elements to business agility. If we look at the circle and the 5 areas around the edge of the circle, these are the generic challenges within every single organization: people, culture, governance, strategy, leadership. It doesn't really matter whether it's public or private, large or small. We all have the same challenges with those things. So the essence of the business agility framework is to understand that this is not about applying an agile methodology to a particular operation. This is about thinking like the organization, thinking how can this organization be an agile organization, bearing in mind these 5 critical issues that we always face. So how do we become agile in all those 5 areas? And then within the center of the circle, we think about, okay, what are the practical things that we need to do in order to deliver an agility outcome for the organization? And that's where that portfolio of products and projects and programs can actually be applied. The key thing is it starts from the outside of the circle, which means it starts at the top of the organization.
Yes.
And this is the really, really important thing. And there are, many, not definitions, but many words of this, like enterprise agility or corporate agility or whatever it is. Actually, this is just about a business agility mindset for the whole organization. And it has to start, I almost said at the top, it has to start at the most influential level, because the pyramid can be the right way up or upside down, really, depending upon the mindset of the organization. But there are influences within organizations that are much more influential, much more important than any organization chart might show. And it's those people who influence the way the organization works who are the people who need to grasp the business agility principle first and then begin to influence the rest of the organization in these 5 critical areas.
Absolutely. And it's amazing also, I mean, at the conference, for instance, we heard so many transformation stories, didn't we, and case studies of people on their agile journey. And we're not saying it's easy, are we?
No, absolutely not.
It's a process.
It is
a journey.
It's a journey. That's exactly the right word. And one of the things about a journey, of course, is that not only that it's not just an event, but actually a journey has many events on it. And the transformation is a lovely word to use in the context of business agility, because people will be transformed more than once on their business agility journey. And the very first transformation is the realization, actually, that this is possible. This actually could be done. Okay, well, and then, we look at the change curve and the cycle that people go through. This is almost, in essence, more esoteric than that. And it starts with this realization that things can be different. There's yet another quote, a lovely phrase. I can't remember who it was that said it. Who said that everybody has 2 lives. The second one starts when we realize we only have one life.
Right.
And that,
nice
in a sense,
yeah.
it's lovely. And that, in a sense, is what happens with people who realize, actually, you know what? We can do this differently.
Sure.
And then there are successive transformations as successes happen on that journey. And I have to say, it's not easy. It's not even straightforward sometimes.
No, sure.
And most important of all, it is a journey that never ends. We can never say to ourselves, that was tough, but now we're agile. That just isn't going to happen. And for really the very obvious reason that every day the environment in which we work is changing. That's the point of this VUCA: uncertainty, volatility, complexity, and ambiguity. We need to be continually and continuously agile in order to cope with the world we now live in.
Absolutely. And the people are at the heart of it as well, aren't they?
There's no other way to be agile than to, in a sense, to utilize the people in the organization, because everything else, and it doesn't matter whether it's the other factors of production, equipment or money or furniture, whatever it is, everything else is actually inert. Only the people have a mind of their own, and only the people can have a mindset of agility.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah. And it gets complex, I guess.
And complexity. I love complexity. It's one of those concepts which the more that one reads and learns about complexity, the harder it is to get one's head around it. The most important thing is actually it's impossible to get your head around it. Things which are complex are insoluble. They will continually be a puzzle forever. And again, we come back to this idea of the only antidote to that is actually to have an agile mindset, to be able to cope with something which is complex, by which I mean difficult and not immediately evincing a solution to the challenge, and which doesn't give any predictable output from any given input. And I think that's one of the technical definitions of complexity. It's impossible to predict the output from any given input. That's exactly what the world is like right now.
That is, isn't it? That's where we are.
That's where we live and operate.
Yeah. Absolutely. Goodness. Okay, so let's look forward then into next year, because it's not far away now, is it?
No, it's not. Less than a month.
So we've got some great plans, haven't we, for next year, 2019? We have,
and I think I talked earlier on about being a community and a think tank and a solutions provider. We want to reinforce all of those three elements to what the consortium does, and indeed what the consortium is. Particularly thinking about the community, we want to build the membership much more broadly across the world, and in doing that, of course, create a member value proposition, if you like, create a range of benefits for our members, which actually makes people want to be a member of the consortium. And then wrapped around that, to engage more deeply with the other stakeholders and the other partners that we have across the world, such that the outcome from that community development will be actually that we have a range of people around the world who are advocates for what the consortium is and what it does, as well as, and this is very, very important, being advocates for business agility more broadly. In the context of the think tank bit, yes, we have the Agile Research Network, which is a group of universities that we support, and which is the core of some of our thought leadership, I think. We'll be developing that increasingly over the course of the next 12 months, so that we spread not only more deeply into the future of agile principles and methodologies, also into more broadly into business agility and how can it be applied at varying levels within the organization. And in the solutions side, we'll be increasing the number of products and services that we supply into the marketplace, really into the community of business agility, such that we start to provide more tangible ways in which people can get value from business agility thinking. So there's some specifics there around what we want to do with the consortium. One of the ways we'll do that, one of the ways in which we'll do all of those things really is to think about how we elevate the brand of the consortium. And I think this is where we speak now to not just the team within the consortium. We speak now to the people who are listening to this webinar, the people who are part of our broad business agility community around the world. How do we elevate the brand of business agility?
Sure.
How do we help those people who are outside the agile bubble, who haven't come across agile principles or thinking before, to recognize that actually business agility is not just useful, it's a requisite, and that it can make Edwards W. Deming, we are here to make a different world. Actually, we are here to make a more agile world, because that's the way to keep it going in a way. So we want to elevate the brand of business agility, and alongside that, of course, the brand of the consortium as a component of business agility.
You just got me thinking, do you have a recommended reading list or anything? Because the amount of quotes that John, is just incredible.
This is quite funny. And within a year, you'll be getting representations from within the membership to say, don't put John Williams on anymore. He keeps giving us another quote. It's interesting. I don't have a recommended reading, so maybe that's something I can produce for the new year. I think that would be a really good idea.
Yeah, a gift to everyone. John's recommended reading list.
Yes, well, we'll see. And as long as there's no ranking involved in any of this.
None at all. No, that's absolutely fine.
I do think, in a way, this idea of promoting business agility as a concept means that looking at our ideas for the future, we do need to talk to both the public sector as well as the private sector, and the public sector in a way almost more so, because the public sector has not had the profitability imperative in the past that the private sector has used to become lean and efficient and stuff like this. And yet, of course, the public sector in almost every country now is under massive pressure to become more effective as well as more cost effective and stuff. And business agility there is one of the ways that we can help them, I think, achieve some of that. Certainly we'll be doing a lot. I nearly said a lot more networking opportunities. I don't mean more events. I think probably a lot smarter networking opportunities. For example, something like a webinar like this is a networking opportunity because, one, it's an opportunity for us thereafter to connect people who were listening into the webinar. And secondly, of course, it's an opportunity for us to promote other networking opportunities that people can go to, whether ours or somebody else's. And I'm really keen on pushing that idea of connecting the people that we know with things and people who are useful to them. We will, of course, be publishing the calendar of events of our events and others,
absolutely.
For next year, including some more from me. And despite the range of photographs at the beginning of this webinar on the presentation, we are not intending to create a cult of personality inside the consortium. But I think that way lies madness. But I think, as nevertheless, having said that, I never believe anything anybody says in front of the word nevertheless. This idea of buzzwords.
Yes.
I'm quite keen on doing a blog just because it's a nice way to keep in touch with, keep in contact with our community. And I've heard a couple of things in the 2 months or so that I've been with the consortium, which feel like buzzwords, although some of them will be proper terms, if you like, in Agile, but have that sort of buzzword feel about them. And one in which I came up with, which is situational agility. And we were just having a conversation, and I said, oh, look, that sounds like a buzzword, situational agility. And apparently it hasn't got much traction anywhere else yet. So I've invented a buzzword for Agile. So now, of course, we'll get 84 people writing in and saying, I've been saying this for years.
Yes,
Stuff
trying to claim it.
Right. Well, what I was going to say is, I'll do a little blog around situational agility as a starter for this. I'd be really, really keen to hear from our community about any other buzzwords that they hear in the context of Agile or agility and things. I mean, I saw a lovely backdrop on a conference the other day, which said minimum viable Agile. And I thought, actually, that's quite a nice way to think about agility as well.
Yes.
And, requisite agility and a lovely one that I heard, which was disruptive agility. And I thought, is there any other kind?
Well, that's right. I mean, do you think, though, with all this new terminology that's kicking in, buzzwords and things, it could be quite confusing to people? It's
going to be incredibly confusing. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do the blog in a way, really, is to try and to pull the sting from some of the buzzwords that are out there. So if people are hearing this, it's a bit like buzzword bingo. We can play this, but in a year's time, we'll be able to do this with agility. If anybody listening to this webinar has come across a buzzword associated with agility, please drop us a line, say a few words about it, and we'll put it into a blog.
Yeah, we're trying to get some understanding around all of this, aren't we, really, and stop that confusion, because I think it's a worthwhile thing to do.
It is, and one of the ways to diffuse the legitimacy that is applied to buzzwords is actually just to identify them as buzzwords, as things, some of which will maintain that traction, some of which, though, will just will fall by the wayside. I mean, it's quite a long time since I heard anybody talk about taking a helicopter perspective, which was one of the things that was in great vogue in the 90s and things like this. So I think if we can amass, and I can feel a glossary coming here, if we can amass just those buzzwords that are washing around in this this great ocean of agility, and actually start to put out there some semblance of legitimization for some of them, and then remove the rest to the not the dustbin of history, because buzzwords don't go that far away, but to the delegitimized form that that they deserve, really.
Sure, I think that's worthy of saying about the myths around Agile as well.
Oh,
I think
God.
if we can include the myths and the buzzwords, and so obviously everybody listening can engage with us and send us some emails on those kind of things, because there's so many myths around it too.
An absolutely great idea. When we live in a world of mythology, I mentioned earlier on, the idea that seniority is wisdom, or the place on the organisation chart gives one authority, and all this sort of stuff. Mythology is the basis of culture very often, and where there is a slight vacuum, or where something is so new it doesn't have a mythology, we tend to create one. And I think Agile and agility is in that phase now, where myths are being created. As Agile is the answer to everything, for example.
Exactly.
One of the points that one of our speakers at the conference was saying, that he was talking to a company, very large mining company, and they had said, we want to be like Google.
That's right.
And he said, how are you going to be like Google? You're a mining company. And it's that sort of mythology around agility that says, this is the panacea. No matter what's wrong with you, become agile. And it's a bit like, let's go global, or let's do digital.
Yes.
It's the answer to all of our problems. So if our listeners have buzzwords or myths that they would like to see featured, let's hear about them.
I think that's a great thing, because when we actually go out and meet people, which we do a lot when we're doing conferences, and when we're speaking at conferences as well, that's really when we hear those myths, and we hear that Agile is all about speed, and you've got to get to the result as fast as possible, and we're kind of going, well, it can do it, you can achieve that, but there is governance, and some people don't believe there's any governance in Agile, for instance, and I mean, we've heard it all, we really have.
Well,
so I think we need to condense that understanding.
I agree entirely, and one of the things that I heard was that Agile is it's a bit like anarchy. And I said, well, the thing that people forget about anarchy is not an absence of rules, it's an absence of rulers. And to that extent, Agile is not completely unlike anarchy in the sense that it's not command and control.
Sure.
I wouldn't, though, draw a parallel between the two if I was making a presentation to your board, if anybody's listening. Agile is just like anarchy. I agree. And I think in a way, we have a responsibility as the not-for-profit organisations, all of us around the world in the field of business agility, we have a responsibility to help people interpret Agile and thinking and business agility in a way that produces a positive result. And some of that is about getting away from the confusion and the mythology and the assumptions that are being made about Agile.
Absolutely. Well, we've almost coming to the question part of the webinar. So if you've got any questions you'd like to pose to John, maybe you'd like to talk about some of those myths or some of those buzzwords, and put them in the question box there, so you can send them through now. That would be fantastic. We are getting a few of them through, so I can actually take the slide now through to questions. So there we go. If you've got any questions, please submit them through onto the platform there where the box is. John, there's a few questions coming through already though. What might the consortium do more of in 2019? That's quite a generic question, and we've probably covered some of that, but are there specifics you want to talk about? Yeah,
we have covered quite a lot of it. I think I will probably come back to something that I said earlier on about making connections, because if we can do more of connecting our members and the other members of the community, the agility community, with each other, with ideas, with opportunities, if we can do that effectively and consistently, then what we'll be doing is opening up the opportunity for people to do things they couldn't otherwise do. So on the one hand, I would like us to continue to be very active in making connections for people in the community. The other thing is actually to speak more clearly about business agility generally. That's what I really, and then this comes back to what we were saying before, Jenny, about the confusion, the myths, the buzzwords, all that sort of stuff. For us to speak clearly and concisely about business agility and its benefit to not just economy but society. And I think if we can do that, those two things, actually we will be adding some value.
Okay, no, that's fantastic. Okay, we've got another question coming through. What would be the first steps for a CEO who is concerned their organisation may not be sufficiently responsive to change?
Call me.
Yes. You're going to sort them out.
Yes, reach out to the Agile Business Consortium. I actually, putting facetiousness aside for the moment, the very first step has already been taken, which is the realisation, actually, we may need to do something here. We may not be responsive enough to change. The second step is to do what CEOs normally do, which is reach out to their peer group for any experience in this area, because it's a cliche. Business is a lonely business. Being the chief executive of an organisation, actually, CEOs need a peer group that enables them to look differently at the challenges they face. And I suspect, let me see if I think about this, reach out to one's peer group, not just with the question. Reach out and ask for a conversation, actually, and reach out to more than one. Put 3 or 4 of your peers together around a table, usually over a bite to eat, because it's quite relaxing and convivial to talk over food, and just say, look, business change, transformational change, what are you people doing about it? Because I have an idea that I'm not doing enough. And that kind of open source thinking, that kind of openness to input from people is one of the ways to overcome the most challenging issues that even somebody at the chief exec level will face. So that's the first thing I would do, is reach out and include me if you would like to.
That's very kind. Yeah, absolutely. Include us. No, definitely. Another question's come through. Some people associate Agile working with small teams and smaller companies.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Agile for multinationals?
Yeah. I'll quote ING, the bank, as an example of this. They have just been through, sorry, I'll start that again. They are still going through, although they have completed the early stages of a transformation, partly digital and partly a business agility transformation. It's a bit like this sort of question, how do you eat an elephant? Bite-sized chunks. It is remarkably difficult for a very large organisation, and a multinational is a very, very large organisation, to do any single thing as a single body.
Right.
And as a result, breaking it into bite-sized chunks is one of the easiest ways to actually get traction. What will probably need to happen, if I think about the bank, ING, for example, they've done this transformation within one of the divisions of the bank. And it will be rolled out then, dependent upon the pace of the success, to other parts of the bank. We took a sort of hypothetical multinational. First of all, it's buy-in at the top. If we remember the framework for business agility, this is acceptance of the need, the demand really for agility at the most influential part of the organisation, acceptance that it applies to all parts of the organisation, not just the operational ones, and acceptance that it's actually about the people and the mindset within the people, and then identifying where within the business that sort of application of transformational thinking might make the most difference or might be most easily accepted. Because there are 2 very different issues to be addressed there.
Right.
And some organisations will go for, this is where we think it'll fly best, and then we can use it as an exemplar. Some will go for, this is where we really, really need it, and therefore we'll try it in there. So I think that bite-sized chunks is the answer to that.
Okay. Another one that's just come through, actually. What's your business agility trend prediction for 2019?
Wow. Okay. If I think about this in 2 ways.
You're on the spot now with that one,
I am
aren't you?
on the spot. Yeah, I remember once when I blithely in an interview once said, I know all the capitals of the world, and somebody immediately wrote in and said, what's the capital of Mali? And I didn't know. And it's Bamako, by the way. So
very good.
That's
They're all checking that.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. My business agility trend for 2019 is that business agility will become much more clearly defined as a concept, and will gain much more traction outside that fraternity that currently understands agile principles and methodologies.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you for that. Right, there's time for just 2 more questions, I think. So one question I have here is, how do you manage your work-life balance? Because you're an extremely busy man.
Yes, I am. And I have to say, my wife will ask me the same question. She'd probably answer it rather differently for me. I don't see the work that I do as work, if I can say it like that. I enjoy so much what I do that I generally am awake when I'm awake. I'm at work. That doesn't mean that I'm doing loads of emails at 4 o'clock in the morning or anything like that. I do 1 or 2. However, what it means is I think about the ideas that I have at work, not least because, of course, what I'm thinking about is not work agile. It is agility, and that's as applicable in my life as it is in my work. So I have some rituals. You know, I in the morning, for example, every single morning I get up and I meditate for 10 minutes every single morning as soon as I wake up. And some people say, why do you meditate after you've just woken up? Well, actually, that's just to settle my mind. I drink half a litre of water every single morning, and I will always drink a hot water and lime every single morning. And people say, well, you know, why? Actually, those are rituals which settle me down, and there are things which I can do anywhere at all in the world. And the meditation, was it? They say everybody should meditate for at least 20 minutes a day, unless you're really, really busy, in which case it should be an hour.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So is a lime a slice of lime, or is it cordial?
Half a lime. Half a lime. Half a lime. So yes, slice it in half, squidge it, and put it in the water, and just hot and cold water, and drink it. And it's actually really, really nice.
Yeah, you're talking to someone that drinks hot water anyway. I don't drink tea or coffee, I drink hot water. So I agree.
You see?
Hot water's good. And I think that's come from when I lived abroad as well. I didn't like the taste of the water, so I started drinking hot water.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Was that the same?
Yeah, and when I lived in the Middle East and the Far East was when I acquired that.
That's strange.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's been an absolute delight talking to you, John. It really has. And thank you for sparing the time, because I know your time is very precious.
Well, I'd say thank you very much indeed, Jenny, for the opportunity to talk to our community. And thank you very much indeed, everybody, for listening. And please get in touch.
Absolutely.
Anything to say or ask, please let us know.
That would be wonderful. Our emails are there. There's my email, jenny@agilebusiness.org, and also John's email there as well. And he's more than happy for you guys to contact him directly, aren't you? And keep this discussion flowing. Questions, myths, buzzwords. We're happy to hear all of it.
This is how we'll clarify what business agility is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we will be in contact with you all again shortly via our website, via the blogs, obviously, and via the social media campaigns that we're running. But if you have any feedback, then please do contact us and let us know. But John, thank you again for your time. It's been a pleasure. 2.5 months has absolutely flown by.
Yes.
It really has. And I, for one, am very interested to see how the excitement that's going to be happening in 2019.
Me too. Thank you very much, Jenny.
All right. Thank you for your time. Okay, well, goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Please look at the website again. We'll be doing more webinars with great guest speakers again in the future. We'll have a whole new lineup for 2019. So send your topics through. If we haven't quite covered them this year, we'll endeavour to cover them next year. But from me, from now, Jenny Bailey, thank you so much for joining us, and goodbye for now.